I think what comes up for me is that a huge shift in how we perceive painful emotions. When a child has, anger or sadness, often adults in their life are quickly trying to change that for them and get them back to happy and grateful. And so there's all these strategies to get children back to being happy. We need to reframe how we see painful emotions. Compliance and control really is the foundation of institutional education and therefore in parenting as well. If you're still functioning in the domination culture paradigm, you're going to suffer. There is an option of a whole frame in which to perceive your children, your role as a parent or a teacher, that is about connection, not control. And so much of our suffering in our role as a parent or a teacher is because we're trying to control behavior.
Right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, back to school. September, that's what it means for a lot of people out there. And on Richard Fortin Presents, today I have Jill McPherson, who comes from an education background. Without any further ado, Jill, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. So, you come from the education world. And now what? I'm super curious to hear about what you're doing and sharing with our audience a little bit about nonviolent communication.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yes, I've been in the education world for over 25 years and decided to take an early retirement because in the past 8 years, I've been studying and training in something called nonviolent communication. And it made such a significant change in my teaching career that I'm really feeling called to leave the school, leave the classroom scenario, and get out into the world and share more. And not just even within the context of education, but I've seen how much it's helped me in my personal life as well, as a parent, as a wife, and I really can see how it would support people no matter what area of career they have.
How'd you learn about this form of communication that's helped you so much?
Yeah, well, actually, within teaching, one day I was in the staff room and a colleague was struggling with a student behavior, and I was offering some ideas. She seemed to be asking for that, and another colleague said, "Hey, Jill, are you trained in nonviolent communication?" And I said, "No, what's that?" And she had done some training in it, and it'd been a few years back, so it was still in the day of these CDs, and she handed me a binder of like 6 CDs and this booklet that she had when she took the course, and said, "Here." And I took it into my vehicle at the end of the day, put the first CD in, and as soon as I heard the founder, Marshall Rosenberg, talk, I'm like, this is what I've been looking for. Because so many times in education, I got into it because I love kids, and I have a undergraduate degree in child psychology and then my teacher's college degree. And I still felt ill-equipped to deal with so many of the mental and emotional needs of children. And when I used the strategies that were taught to me within teacher's college, I found there's many times where I was feeling like I was disservicing children, and I would see like pain on their face, but I just felt like I either had to implement the strategies that I was taught or the rules that were being enforced in that school, or I had to opt out, and neither one seemed to be working for me. So this gave me that other option that I was so desperately looking for.
At this time of year, everybody's excited, right? Because it's a new beginning, new year. Some students may be less excited because their break is over. The parents probably very excited that the break is over. What do you think out of this course, these teachings that you're working on, what do you think is the one thing everybody should remember, regardless of where they sit around the table, whether it's a parent, a child, a teacher, a principal? What do you think at this time of year is something they should all remember?
I think what comes up for me is that a huge shift in how we perceive painful emotions. So often when, in this case, we'll talk about a child. When a child has, anger or sadness, any painful emotion, often adults in their life are quickly trying to change that for them and get them back to happy and grateful. And having painful emotions is like the enemy. It's like the thing that you don't want. And so there's all these strategies to get children back to being happy. And I think the number one thing I would offer parents and teachers is that we need to reframe how we see painful emotions, and that it's not something to mask or get rid of. It's something, or to control. It's something to look at like a friendly friend that's like saying, hey, there's something here that needs looked at. So in our culture, we tend to see painful emotions as something we don't want to feel. But painful emotions are actually like that great friend of yours that's like really being honest with you and tapping you on the shoulder and saying, Richard, there's something here you need to look at. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of my greatest wishes, is that we could start shifting, particularly in our education paradigms, around how we perceive and respond to painful emotions.
So now you're developing a business that helps people learn about this, right?
Right, yes. And I'm open to whether it's somebody needing support in the education system or in the workplace or in the home.
So you'll accommodate based on what the need is. How do people reach you? How do people learn about this or get more information about what you're talking about here?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have a website, jillmcpherson.com.
Yeah.
So all of the information is there and a way to contact me. I also put reels on social media. They can follow me on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, and see what I give little communication tips or paradigm or reframes, I call them, a little 90-second reel to just offer how to navigate day-to-day challenges.
Yeah, that's cool. And how does that go? How do you create content for that? How do you decide?
It's totally inspired,
Yeah.
and it's completely from my day-to-day experiences.
Yeah.
So I'll have a challenging parenting moment or something, and then I'll go, oh, I can do a reel on this. I'll have a challenging conversation with my husband. I'll do a reel on this. And then, of course, I've got so much material from 8 years of doing NVC with students in the classroom and supporting parents. A lot of the clients that I have one-to-one are parents that are looking for support through challenging situations.
Yeah, it's not easy being a parent these days, is it?
No.
I'm not a parent, so I see my friends with kids and I go, wow, congratulations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. And I think, too, the reason why they're struggling is because we are on the cusp of challenging old thinking. And we were raised with parenting paradigms or teaching paradigms that was really based on controlling your children's behavior. And that was sort of the number one goal. And for the most part, at least in my cohort, majority of us did that. We took the treat to be good. It was really important to be seen that we're good and we're doing what we're told. Look at me, look at me. Compliance and control really is the foundation of institutional education, and therefore in parenting as well. And so I think what we're seeing is a shift in children coming to us that are like, you know what, this isn't working.
Weren't our children always saying that? It's just now you can't
I think
beat
they're
them.
getting more
Now
vocal.
you can tweet about it and
Yes.
expose them, so now they can't hide because of
I think that
technology being what it is.
yes, technology is connecting them, and so they're being exposed to other ways of thinking and behaving. And the reason why many adults are struggling and seeing this, maybe as an unideal thing, is because if you're still functioning in the domination culture paradigm, which is what we're used to, it's been around for centuries, if you're still trying to educate and raise children through that lens, you're going to suffer. And the problem is sometimes people say, well, okay, well, then I'll just opt out. Kind of like back to my experience with teaching. I felt like I either had to be fully in this control paradigm or I'm checking out. And what many don't know is there is an option of a whole frame in which to perceive your children, your role as a parent or a teacher, that is about connection, not control.
That's the shift.
That's the shift.
It's about connection, not control.
Right. And so much of our suffering in our role as a parent or a teacher is because we're trying to control behavior.
Right.
So for an example, when I was teaching, the last 8 years, I was teaching music and drama. So I was the teacher with the cart that was going down the hall and racing to the next class. And before NVC, I would spend a lot of time coming to that classroom and standing outside the door and taking some deep breaths and thinking, okay, what am I going to do to control 25 kids? And then my whole frame changed to, what do I need to do to connect to 25 kids? And when I made connection, the frame in which I saw them, the need for rules and control just didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I really couldn't think of any rule that I would offer them because I was connecting to them empathetically through a lens of understanding and getting curious about their behavior instead of wanting to control it and shame it and guilt them into, I need you to behave differently so I can feel better about myself as a teacher and I can feel like I'm doing a good job. And instead I would get compassionately curious over, what's this behavior telling me? And what need are they trying to get met? And then I started to also teach them. So particularly in the context of music and drama, it was quite easy that, on paper, it looked like I was teaching music and drama. But really what I was doing is using those mediums to teach them nonviolent communication. So particularly in drama, they might say they come in from recess, they had a fight on the playground. I'm like, great material. Let's use this. And I would teach them the skills they needed to reframe how they saw the bully or the enemy and get compassionately curious over what need were they trying to get met when they took your ball instead of being a victim to somebody taking your ball, right? Because domination culture is all about blame. You have a sad or angry feeling, there's got to be someone to blame. So we don't learn how to listen to our feelings, we just learn how do I get out of this, and I'll blame. So I help them to reframe that when we are in blame, we are now a victim to somebody else changing their behavior in order to be happy. So let's free ourselves of somebody needing to apologize, needing to change their behavior, and let's use that feeling to find out, what do we really need here? What's missing? And how can I meet that need regardless of somebody else's behavior? So it's very freeing and empowering to teach children this. And of course, very much so in my own life.
I bet you children pick it up better than adults.
Very much so. Yeah, and I was teaching down in kindergarten, and the great thing about kindergarten is when you go into a kindergarten class, they show up to school at 4 and 5 with just so much love and understanding and connection, and so they haven't collected a baggage, this heavy suitcase or backpack of painful beliefs. Unfortunately, it shifts pretty quickly because they soon learn that the name of the game is to prove your innocence, prove somebody else's guilt, to stay out of trouble, and do what you're told in order to get love and approval from your teacher. So they jump in pretty quick. By the time they get to grade 4, 5, and 6, they're pretty steeped in it. But the younger ones, when I introduced this to them, it was like I was connecting them back to their own mother tongue. That they'd come to school and they learned a new language, but they were coming back to what was truly natural for them. So it's much easier for me anyway to teach this to children than to adults, because adults have such a huge resistance to letting go of beliefs that they've had all their life, or at least they don't remember when they adopted these beliefs. But most of us as adults are walking around with beliefs that we never chose. They were just offered to us and we integrated them into our lives. So a lot of people aren't interested in questioning their thinking. It's very disruptive. And even if I can connect to them, the cause and effect of this painful belief is creating this suffering, not the person you're mad at, there's a real desire as humans, we want to hold on to what's familiar. And we will suffer first to keep something that's familiar. So it also explains why someone might stay in a toxic relationship, right?
Yeah, or be addicted to something that's hurting them and they know it. And we do it over and over and over again. Yeah, because familiar is comforting. And so for somebody in their adulthood now to be questioning their thinking and do what I call the mental inventory. So I always give the analogy of a closet. If you decide you're finally going to open the closet doors and declutter that closet, it's overwhelming, it's exhausting. And the number one thing is not actually getting rid of the stuff, it's deciding, do I keep this or not?
is this something that's serving me well or not? And by the time if you've ever really truly emptied a closet, suddenly the room is just a disaster, and you think like, why did I even open the doors? I just want to put it all back in and close it and go back to the way it was. But when you start doing this work and you start opening the doors and investigating, you can't go back. And so then it becomes, what am I keeping and what am I not?
Nice. And that's a nice feeling when you've done that.
Yes. And I would suggest it's an ongoing process, just like any closet, right? It's ongoing. You get some clutter back in there again, and it's time to, it's another time to investigate and do some more cleaning.
Are there any books or references that you give people if they're really curious about this that helps them learn more about? Because I imagine this is a system. This is a way of looking at things. There's
So actually, I brought in with me.
Oh, perfect.
This is sort of like the first foundational book to reach for. It's Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, A Language of Life. And it really is. It's about how our beliefs and the language that supports beliefs either, I'll backtrack, in domination culture, which is what most of us are living and experiencing. Language is used to keep people in power powerful, and to keep people who are their power over, to keep them in control. So any hierarchical structure there's language and beliefs that keeps everybody in their place. And so this is about dismantling that and really connecting to people at a human level instead of a story of you should and you shouldn't and you need to so that I can feel better about myself. And so he talks about the first principle is shifting the lens through which we see the world and see each other. Instead of being in a state of judgment, it's shifting to look at each other through observation. And it's a really challenging thing to do because our default setting is to be in judgment. We're constantly judging the right and wrong, good and bad in ourselves and others. And so it's about, and I also brought in this when I do workshops, I often have a bag of sunglasses, and I get everyone to put their sunglasses on, and we use this analogy of whatever beliefs we have is the lens through which we see and interpret our world. And that's why many of us can be in the same shared time and space and report something different. Because we have different life experiences and different paradigms through which we're interpreting our world, right? So this kind of gives them a real visual, and I'll even say something like I invite them to take their glasses off, and I'll keep mine on and say, the room is quite dark. Do you find the room dark? And, they're like, no, and have a chuckle of like, no, so do you think I'm lying? Like the room is dark. And so to validate that you can be sharing your perception, and I can have a different perception, and nobody's right or wrong. It's your perception. It's your truth. And a lot of what people tell me about how they perceive their world then tells me what's in the filters. So I can really start to hear through their language, their belief system. Right? So, yeah.
No, that's interesting. So, but what happens if you're the light operator and you need to get the right light for the job? And so you can't, everybody has different perception, but there is more clarity in some people's perception than others, is there not? Is there more clarity possible based on, say somebody takes time to notice and be more conscientious about how they position themselves or think about things? The point of doing that reflection would be to gain clarity, probably, right? Or at least notice. So there are people that go through the world through their choices that have better outcomes. It's not subjective, is it?
So just let me check that I got it right. So you're asking that some people have maybe done more house cleaning of their closet or done more cleaning of their lenses?
Right, or if you were responsible for, say, getting the lighting right in this room. So I could have my sunglasses on and you could have your rose-colored sunglasses on and Adam could have the blue lens on. But at the end of the day, if the objective of the podcast video is to have it be clear on YouTube, there is a right and wrong to getting that, right? There's maybe different ways to get at it, but there is based on the choices we make for the lighting, going to be a result at the end of the day. And I guess what I'm wondering is that's not so you can communicate with your lens, but that doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, is there not an objective truth? Is there not something that is, the lighting's better in situation A than it is in situation B, even though you might not see it that way? But as a majority or as a people, we see it that way.
Yeah. I think when we hear right or wrong, in NBC, that's violent.
Okay.
So the reframe for that would be that, what you said, you experience the room this way, this lighting, and I experience it this way, and your camera person experiences it another way. And so I think the goal, I am imagining, and you let me know if I'm got this right,
is clarity. The goal for me is clarity.
Is clarity. And that you have mutual, shared understanding of yes, this is the lighting. And you might struggle to get there right away, because if you have different lenses, and it takes communication to get to that shared understanding. But if we're connecting with somebody from the place of, I need you to get this right, I need you to join me because I'm right, now we're in a violent interaction. So if you say the lighting is too dark and your camera person says, no, it's just right, then it's not about deciding who's right or wrong. I'm assuming the goal would be to come to a shared understanding and agreement. Then it would be navigating to figure out what lens or what's going on for that person or myself. That's why we aren't having this shared experience. But if we're like, I got to figure out how to prove him wrong, now the fight's on. And this is where we have violence in our culture all the time. In our marriages, in schools, in the workplace, because somebody's need to be right is superseded or more important than making connection and understanding with the other person.
Yeah, but what if it's not someone? What if it's the the video quality itself? What if it's so let's think of building a house. So just because somebody says, I see it this way, and therefore it's okay, doesn't mean the building inspector is going to buy it that way, because he's got to have the engineering behind it. So just because Richard thinks that it's going to be okay doesn't mean that the building code says that's okay, right? So how do we get standards to be in line with our objectives? So in this case, we're using clarity to actually get to a right decision.
Yeah.
To get to a right, because there is a better way of shooting or of building a house or of doing anything. And if school is the way where we learn how to get to those standards, regardless of what lens we're looking through, how do we do that when we disagree? If somebody just digs in their heels and says, I don't see it that way. That's not clear to me. But it's clear to 95% of the population, and that's the market. That's who you need to satisfy. That's the job. How does that resolution happen in a nonviolent context?
Yeah. So coming to resolution then would be about listening through the lens of trying to understand the person. If we come back to your building analogy of Richard says this building's fine and the inspector says no, it's not. It would be getting curious over what's in Richard's lens, or the building inspector's lens for that matter, that's creating this difference. So it's back to the steps with Marsha Rosenberg. It's there's always one of the rules is empathy before education, connection before correction. Right? So if you truly wanted to get on the same page, instead of approaching, say, the building inspector or Richard from what we traditionally do, and that is, let me give you the information to prove to you that you're wrong. It's still listening for what is coming up for Richard, and then let's say we'll pick on you. What's coming up for Richard that he is in that belief. And the more we connect to not trying to prove somebody right or wrong or trying to prove ourselves right, then we can start to hear underneath what need is trying to be met. And it could be that you're coming from a place of you truly believe, according to your education, your background, that this structure is stable and it is okay. And it could be also something around your need to be important, to be validated, to be seen and recognized. And we can often tell ourselves any story we need to get that need met of recognition, appreciation, validation. Right? So I'm going to keep inviting you and the viewers and listeners that if you're still approaching it from a place of, I still want to know how to get to the point where Richard knows he's wrong, then you'll have to continue using violent strategies that are very normal and accepted in our culture, that create a huge amount of disconnection.
Yeah, because we live in an incredibly polarized world right now, even in politics, right? Like there's really two ways of seeing, the issue, whether we're talking about leading up to the American election. There's, there's really, depending on how you see things or who you're listening to, you could really be looking at the same news clip in a different light, based on what, and both people looking at that news clip in a different light believe the truth is with them, right? Can even call your social network the truth social, and so that you could say what you want. But if you were to fact checker, and I'm not picking on Trump more than the other guys, I'm not like, I don't have to vote in that mess, but you can claim the truth, you could claim anything because you say that's how you see it, but it doesn't mean that in terms of the world we live in, you're accommodating how somebody else might be seeing the world, or how that news actually impacts people, or who you might be doing it for, like fighting for.
Yeah. So I'm here.
It's just kind of interesting for me to find in a world where like the truth seems to just be an idea now, not really based in like a logic. In a logic that's understandable, at least to somebody who might not even pick a side. It's just an interesting world we live in.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also because in domination culture in the past, we had people who are truth providers, and it could be people in the science community, religious community. We had people who decided truth for us. Yeah. And now we've shifted into an era where there's lots available, and people are, picking this is good, this is good, this is. And in nonviolent communication, the good news is the goal is not to decide who's right or wrong or what is true.
It's just to understand.
It's shared understanding for sure, but even when people come to me for advice, I would never tell them what's true. My job is to actually break the pattern of looking outward to determine what's true and going inward. And I assure people that there's an access to wisdom within you. And so when I hear them telling their challenge and they're distressed, first of all, I remain a silent, empathetic presence so that they can express what's really on their mind, unfiltered, just let it out. And then through questioning, I start to help to guide them to, look at what's in their closet. And not again from like, I'm not going to tell you, if I came over to help you clean your closet, I'm not going to tell you, Richard, what to keep and what not. I'm just inviting you to notice what's there. And then you can start to connect between cause and effect. And then it's about the feeling that when we're in alignment with our truth, there's a very peaceful and ease feeling within our body. And we have a lot of stress because the old way of looking outward isn't really working anymore. And it was taken away from us centuries ago by people who were trying to keep power and knew that they didn't want people to access wisdom from within. They said, you don't know anything. You need me to tell you what's true.
Yeah.
And this paradigm is still happening in many places. I mean, you can still go to see a doctor, and the doctor's like, don't tell me what to do. I know what you need.
Right.
And so
the only way to get to God is through Jesus,
right,
the one and only.
Exactly. So there's many beliefs that people have that disempower people. So nonviolent communication is also a frame in which people become self-empowered. And another story I love to tell people when I'm doing workshops, and I'll share with you now, that really demonstrates what I'm trying to say when people get caught up in what's right and wrong and what's true. And this is actually a cute little story that my mom told me years ago that she thinks is, just a cute little story, but I think it's, a metaphor for life. And the way it goes is my sister was taking swimming lessons when she was quite young, I think maybe about 5, the story goes. And my mom, we lived out in the country on a farm, and driving to town was a big deal. So my mom and the neighbor whose son was also taking swimming lessons, they decided they would take turns carpooling. And my mom said she's driving down the country road, and she looks in the rearview mirror, and my sister is behind her, looking out her mirror, at her window like this. And Scott's over here, and he's looking out the window, like that, however, like this. And so she sees them looking opposite ways. And as they're going down the road, Mr. Anderson on this side, he had beef cattle, and they're all out in the field and, gathering, trying to get the little bit of shade under the trees. It's July. And on this side, Mr. Knowlton had sheep. And as they're driving down the road, all of a sudden my sister says, "Oh, look at all the cows." And Scott says, "They're not cows, they're sheep." And when I tell the story to people, I say, okay, so who's lying? Somebody's got to be lying. Is it cows or is it sheep? Someone needs a detention. Someone needs their parents called. We have to get to the bottom of this. Who's being malicious? Who's being deviant? And we see each other this way all the time. And yet, was anybody lying? No. They were looking through a frame, and they told their truth. And we spend so much time fighting, either within our homes, within schools, within the workplace, politically, around the world. Those fights around the world politically are happening because they're fighting over who's right, what's the truth. And it's so tragic if they could just understand that they're looking through different frames.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that you think would help somebody understand really the power of these types of workshops and of this type of work for you or with you that would help them maybe take the leap to reach out and organize a conversation with you so that they can see how your services might benefit them?
Yeah, I think what comes up for me is, the people who have reached out. And often we reach out for support when we just feel like we've had enough, like we can't take it anymore. And when we have that sort of claim of like, I can't take it anymore, it's interesting how everything shifts in our universe. And suddenly, they might see, a social media reel of mine. They might hear somebody say, oh, you should watch Marshall Rosenberg. They might talk about a workshop that they attended, or they're in the bookstore and this book like falls at their feet, right? And so I would just offer that when you're ready to live it with more peace and ease, and you really set the intention that I'm also willing to let go, that I'm willing to declutter the closet, because we can't put anything new. If you can't even close those doors, we can't even put in anything to replace it. So if you're up for the mental house cleaning, if you're up for letting go of needing to be right, if you're ready to stop trying to control your life and others, then that's when you reach out to me.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, thanks for going on the wild ride that is the Richard Fortin Presents show without as much structure as maybe
I loved it.
you're used to.
I loved it.
Enjoy, but I really appreciate you going with the flow and coming in and being in North Bay, coming to see the studio. It's a real pleasure to have you.
Yeah.
And where do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so JillMcPherson.com.
Yep.
And again, social media.
On all the things.
Yeah.
Just look up Jill McPherson.
And you'll find me for sure.
That's wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, please go check that out and give us a subscribe, a like, a share. Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. For now, that's going to be it. Adam, how many minutes are we at?
We're at 37.
Whoa! We are on.
We started a little early.
We made it. Thanks for joining us for the ride. Really appreciate it. Talk to you soon. Ciao for now.